Our spoiler review for Hereditary starts right after this. Welcome back, folks, to Pop Pop Fizzle. I'm Jeff.
I'm Heidi.
And we are very tired, but we're here to do our spoiler review for Hereditary. So I'm going to say that again. This is a spoiler review. If you have not seen Hereditary, please turn this video off right now. Hop over and go check out our non-spoiler review so that you don't ruin the movie-going experience for yourself. Okay? All right. That's the last warning that you get. We are in spoiler territory in 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay. So you had some thoughts after letting it marinate last night.
Yeah. So, we went to go see it last night. I had to go to work. Jeff worked on other stuff all night, so neither one of us...
Still wearing the same clothes. Haven't been to sleep yet.
Am I wearing the same shirt?
I don't know.
Anyway, we've both had time to let it marinate, let it kind of sit with us and kind of go with it. And so I said to Jeff as I was coming in this morning that, the time it took for it to marinate overnight has made me like it more. So I actually really like this movie a lot more than I did when I left it. I think some of it had to do with our theater going experience wherein people found things funny that were not funny at all. But also like just trying to process really where it was going. In the theater itself, I thought to myself several times, I really like that I don't know where they're going, and I can't read this like I can like any other horror movie scripted thing. So I really enjoyed this movie quite a bit.
I felt like, and this kind of goes to the theater experience that we had where people were laughing at moments that shouldn't have been laughed at. It wasn't the case of a movie being unintentionally funny. No,
not at all.
Which is it happens. We've all been in those kinds of movies where something that's meant to be taken seriously just isn't. This is not the case with that. I think this is the case where what some people find scary or what some people are looking for in a horror movie can be different from person to person. So for me, the creep factor on this was pretty high.
Yeah.
The tension was ratcheted up pretty high by the director and by the actors. But for some people, like if they came in for gore, not that there wasn't any, but if they came in looking for a specific type of horror movie, this might have been a more thoughtful horror movie and a better acted horror movie than what they're used to if what they were expecting was schlock. Not that there's anything wrong with schlock.
How did you do that?
I don't know. Mind melt. But so I think that depending on your expectation, depending on what it is that you like about horror, it's possible. I mentioned in our non-spoiler review that this sort of I was mentioning some of the better horror films to come out over the last few years, and one of the ones I mentioned was It Follows. I think this is a good parallel to It Follows in the sense that some people found It Follows, myself included, very disturbing and off-putting. Like as far as it was horror, but it wasn't necessarily what I normally get from a horror film.
Right.
It was a very different type of horror film. And I feel like Hereditary is that. Now, it does have some horror tropes that are familiar, but all done in a very unique way and not given to you, not served up to you in a spoon the way that horror movies typically do. They don't walk you through and tell you every little thing. They expect you to use your brain as you're watching this film.
What?
And yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Odd.
And so there's a lot of respect for the audience with this film. Right. And I think that makes it stand apart.
And Jeff had mentioned a lot of recent horror, original style movies. But as we were leaving the theater last night, I said this really has a Rosemary's Baby sort of vibe to it too. It was definitely creepy, definitely weird, definitely not necessarily, you're not necessarily expecting what's going to happen, and of course the ending was also very interesting.
After we saw the film, I did go online and I saw some of what was being said about this at some of the film Festivals, yeah. Sorry, I'm tired. The word wasn't coming to my brain. Yeah. And some of what was being said were comparisons to The Exorcist.
Oh, I said that too.
Yeah, and so
but I more meant Rosemary's Baby.
And so
yeah.
I thought that was interesting as well. Mm-hmm. So far we've managed to not talk spoilers in a spoiler review. I don't know how this happens.
So let's get into it. So the very first thing that we mentioned to each other in the car was we were really expecting for the daughter Charlie to be the main character, kind of seeing
the focal point.
Seeing the effects of everything that had happened before, like the grandmother and the mother, whatever trauma they'd gone through, we would see it in effect in her, and they killed her.
Yeah, within the first act, and so her death becomes a turning point for everything. And so
I was not expecting that.
When I said in the non-spoiler review that I love the fact that the trailers did not give us the story. It gave us creepiness and hints at some of the elements, but it really leaned into Charlie as a character.
Cut together in a way that did not give you what exactly to expect.
Yeah, and so Charlie's character, while important to the overall story, didn't make it past that first act.
Nope.
And
she was killed in a very gruesome way.
Yeah, that part of the film, that gore. In and of itself, I loved some of the notions of this because everything was so closely tied to, sort of mental issues, mental health issues. The Toni Collette's character, Annie, having gone through such a traumatic childhood, and how all of those things affected her. So when you see that moment for the son, for Peter, knowing what's happened, but not being willing to look into the rearview mirror, that sort of damage, that sort of psychological place of, I know it, but I can't see it, and I don't want to think about it, and I can't deal with it, and just driving home and going to bed.
Yeah. That was painful to watch.
It was painful to watch.
So uncomfortable.
And so dark, and yet not part of the supernatural element of darkness, just the darkness of this family and the stuff that they have had to go through and dealt with, or not dealt with. Yeah. And so to me, those elements worked really well. Another element that I thought was just fantastic, and I think I mentioned this in the non-spoiler review, was how disjointed they kept us as an audience with camera movements, the same camera movements that would move you through the set would move you through a miniature.
Yeah.
And those same movements would happen, so that the more it happened, you began to feel like you weren't sure whether you were in a miniature or whether you were in their house or what you were about to see.
And then you'd mentioned also the lighting was just very disjointed, where we knew it was like, 1:45 in the morning at some point, but you could see bright light shining in, and was it the moon? Was it like the driveway light, or were we
the sun would be Peter would be at school and it would look really dark, almost like twilight sort of time. So there was a lot of that stuff, like you really weren't sure when, of timing, of placement, of some things. So it left you feeling as disjointed as the characters.
Just kind of jarring.
Did.
Which is a good jarring. It wasn't a bad, like, what is happening here? It was like, whoa.
Also on the notion of lighting, but I think more so to the direction for this film. And I was telling Heidi when she got home from work that this was actually the director, Ari Aster, his first full-length feature. Everything he's done up to this point was a short film, so high marks on this as your first outing. There were so many times where he would frame a wide shot, and there would be something in that frame that was hidden back in the shadow, and the light was just right to where you could see that there was something there, but you couldn't see what it was, and you couldn't tell if it was something scary or if it was something mundane. You couldn't tell.
Yeah.
And you would try, as the movie progressed and you began to see more things, you would try to pick out. And there was a point in the film where I leaned over at you and said, there's something there. There's something right there. And it was right as Peter had woken up. And at this point, we're in the third act. Things are, taking
crazy.
a turn for really bad, evil stuff going down.
Yeah.
And he sits up in the bed, and I could see something in the corner, but the lighting was done in such a way that you couldn't tell what you were seeing. You couldn't tell if you were seeing anything at all. And I kept having that feeling, and they stayed on that wide shot of him rubbing his eyes and calling his mom's name and looking around. And I kept saying, there's something there, there's something there, there's something there. And what to me was brilliant is that instead of showing us that, yes, there's something there by having her move, they waited until they turned the camera
and then you
to another angle, and then it was just skitter right across so fast that you could barely see that it was Annie, but
different,
but enough, yeah. And so instead of giving you what you would have expected,
some sort of jump scare,
he kept giving you, subverting that expectation in a really good way.
One thing I thought, I wondered about the relationship between Joan and the family. As soon as she said, my mom used to embroider stuff like this, I was like, oh, okay, so where exactly, what's happening here? But I thought the most interesting conversation that they had, and I think you had stepped out to go to the restroom, but
those big Cokes, man,
they are fantastic, but yeah, it's not good on bladder. We hear Annie talking to Joan about kind of a little bit about what happened, or at least kind of feelings wise, and then Joan says, well, how are you feeling about your son? And instead of answering how she felt about what happened, how she felt about him, how she felt about anything like that, she steps back and talks about a sleepwalking incident wherein she went cuckoo and almost set everything on fire, including herself and her children. And it's like, that's not the question she asked.
Right.
So what's happening here? What's happening here?
And it makes you wonder, too, because of what we learned about her mother during the course of the film.
Yeah.
What really happened to her father and her brother.
Right.
If all of this was set up to create the perfect vessel for this this demon king or whatever, then what had actually happened?
Yeah.
For her to be the only surviving member.
Yeah.
And then, with Alex Wolff's portrayal of Peter.
Oh, goodness.
Toni Collette was amazing throughout. And
yeah,
I thought, after we did our non-spoiler review, I actually watched Chris Stuckman's review.
Okay.
And he felt like she should be nominated for something.
This is worthy of that.
It was that good of a performance. And I have a hard time disagreeing with that, because I feel like it was so solid throughout, and she had to portray so many things, and sometimes within a moment or two,
but it was
go through different emotions.
Not just minute or subtle, but it was just so believable. You could see just stuff cracking in her. Yeah. And I thought that was awesome.
Even early in the film, when she goes into Charlie's room, and Charlie's wearing that wool sweater that she's all zipped up in or whatever, and she's rubbing on her and kissing on her and talking to her, there was this look in her eyes of just madness, barely holding it in, trying to be a good mother, trying to do what was right, but just something happening in her head that we weren't privy to. And to me, to be able to show that with just your eyes in a scene that's dimly lit and
the angle was a little,
and without a lot of dialogue, just to be able to convey that sense of there's something not right with this woman.
Yeah.
Her acting throughout was great, but that scene at the dinner table with she and Gabriel Byrne and Alex Wolff after Charlie's death, as they're eating, and the husband Steve is trying to
hold it together,
and we kind of see that he's not free with his emotions. He's taking care of everybody else. He's very busy dealing with all that, and we see him break down once.
Yeah, this poor guy. I mean, he got, the mom's come in with Annie's come in with her family trauma, and they are trying to make a good life, and then suddenly just everything's down the tubes. This poor guy just stuck. This is his life. Of course.
And he ends up as his own barbecue. Basically. So that's no good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that scene though. The moment where Peter says to her, "What about you? Why did she go to the party, Mom?
Why did you even send her?"
Yeah. And that was something that, the movie was so intense.
We didn't even think about
I was so focused on him because of him zoning out and going home and getting out of the car and all that stuff, that I had forgotten about the fact that she had pressured him into taking her.
Yeah.
And to what that had to be doing to her insides, that was making her focus on him, because I'm not going to focus on me. I can't think about that.
Yeah, it's like, what have you done?
Right. And so all of that, just the pure psychological side of all of that, kept that tension just ratcheting up and ratcheting up.
Even without supernatural stuff, this would have been really good.
So that by the point we got to what was really happening, and we got to the supernatural stuff, there was no shot for these people to deal with any of that. They were so screwed by their own emotions and their own trauma,
their own actions,
that what were they going to do with any of that?
Nothing. There's no hope for it. Now,
we're a family-friendly channel, so I will say there's some nudity in this toward the end of the film. It is not sexual in nature at all. It is very off-putting and very...
meaning absolutely no offense to the actors and the models who are there.
But it's meant to be. It's meant to make you go, what is happening here? Yeah. What are they doing?
Yeah.
And so that was effective. It made me feel like, ooh, what? Yeah. This is really creepy.
Why this?
Yeah, and I really feel I liked some of the callbacks. I liked that the smiling guy that smiled at Charlie at the wake was the guy that when Peter turned around and you just saw the silhouette of him naked standing in that doorway. It was the same smile, the same guy. Yeah. That the old woman that we saw at the end was the old woman that had waved to Charlie from across the thing.
That.
Yeah. So all those things came back to play. There was nothing wasted in this film.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I thought about while I was watching, is like there was no point in time where I felt like this is so boring, why can't they get to anything else? There was always something.
It's never spinning its wheels. Yeah, it's always either building something within a character that will pay off later, or it's building a situation that will pay off later, or it's building a mood that will pay off later. And all of those things come into play. So this is a 2-hour plus movie. It was 2 hours.
2 hours and 7 minutes. We had to time it right. 2 hours and
7 minutes, yeah. So 2 hours and 7 minutes, and not a moment of that is wasted on anything that the story didn't require. Mm-hmm. And, to me it was kind of brilliant that they used the psychological stuff of her attempting to go to group therapy.
Calling it the movies, that was interesting.
Yeah, like she couldn't admit that she needed some sort of help, but her going there and sort of blurting out all this terrible family history, it was exposition.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It made sense because you're in a setting wherein you're supposed to share your story with other people who have experienced things. And so she ends up not even talking about why she's really there, or why her, she doesn't talk about her mother. No. She talks about everything. And so you see that she's cracking up. She can't even stay focused to do what she's here to do. Mm-hmm. It just all comes flooding out. And so she's, all the times that we see her acting normal, she's holding back all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So by the time she loses Charlie, there's no holding back anything anymore. No. It's just full on crazy.
Yeah, it's gone. And I wonder also about the whole connection with the miniatures thing. It just, it's an artist thing. It's her livelihood, and whatever it is she's doing, she apparently is successful enough to have gallery showings. Mm-hmm. But it's like, her life was horrible. Does the miniatures that she makes, she even makes one of the accident scene, but is it her way of processing it to just make sure that everything was at perfect detail, little wise, and so that she can have those perfect details even if everything else is completely imperfect,
to make the bad things small.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I wondered.
And I think that was shown to us visually in the fact that we would see a particularly disturbing scene that she had put together or whatever, and then we would get the camera inside that scene looking at her, where she's huge. Mm-hmm. And because of those camera movements, we feel like we're inside a room.
Where she's huge.
But she looks huge. Yeah. And so we got all these different perspectives. There were also things in the miniatures that were part of her story that she never verbalized.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So the scene of her nursing...
Yeah.
And then her mother standing there with her robe open, or her gown open.
Right, and so
what was happening there?
Well, she had said to Charlie that, she wanted to take care of you, she wanted to feed you. And I was like, okay, but, she's old, so But then that scene we see, it's like, what was she trying to do? Did that happen?
Yeah.
And so it's like that again, a little more disturbing.
But again, that's trusting the audience to sort of see something that's disturbing, but
make a connection.
But help, layer it in with the other things that you know, and go, ooh, that's really creepy.
That's you know, I get doting grandmas, whatever else, that's fine. No problem with that, but
that's definitely
when you're trying to step in and nurse a baby that's not yours.
It's a problem.
Other cultures are fine, but that's usually not the norm for this one, so that's fine.
Yeah. So I think that, all in all, to me, this was a scary film that I'll think about for a while. Like the use of sound, whether it was Charlie's little noise, right? Or
people were making that noise at me, not at me last night, but when they were walking around, I was like, can't hear that. Not right now. It's like, what happened?
But the use of those sorts of things, the use of, as I said, the camera movements and the lighting and all of those things help make this story something really different.
Yeah.
And, I feel like it could be that certain people go in and they're like, man, this didn't scare me at all. But I think if you appreciate the psychological and that aspect of it, that alone should pull you in, whether or not you buy the supernatural side of it. By the time that comes in, we're already so invested with this family. We're already so into how damaged and messed up they are, and they're scary without the supernatural.
Right, that's what I said. If it had no supernatural elements, it would still be a great movie. Just because we've mentioned it a million times. So there was a scene where the son, Peter, thank you. Peter was broken down, ugly crying, just full on sobs. And the whole road next to us, all like 6 or 8 people started laughing. And I was like, this isn't funny. He's actually having a moment here.
Yeah,
and
he feels responsible for his sister's death.
And he is,
a funny moment.
Yeah, he is full on ugly sobbing, and they all laughed, and I was like.
But again, as we said, big shout out to Alex Wolff for that performance.
Oh my gosh, so
he
good.
nailed that. Seeing him in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle.
He was good.
We liked him in that film. But, sometimes you see somebody in a film like that, and it's like they can be really good in a film like that, but then you give them something more meaty and more dramatic, and they can't handle it. Mm-hmm. And I thought his just, he was so broken, so down, so, even just, he was already down at the beginning of the film before things started really going wrong.
Right.
When his dad asked him about, if he was feeling sad about his grandmother, he was just like, not,
Well, she was a
didn't
difficult
say
woman.
anything, right? But just that sort of, he was already detached. He already had his own issues.
He's already checked out.
Charlie clearly had her issues.
Oh my gosh.
And then and then the dad. Even the dad, who was probably the most normal of all of them, had his own issues because he couldn't feel his own emotions because he was so busy taking care of everybody else as they were cracking up.
Yeah.
So I thought this was just strong performances from everyone, strong direction. This, to me, if people pay attention and it catches on with the right people and gets the right word of mouth, I can't see this not being something that people talk about for a while and something that gets nominated.
I
know sometimes award shows are prejudiced against genre films,
contests.
but some of these performances are
definitely, and I can foresee this being, if somebody's taking a film class in about 5 or 7 years, this, if they go through a horror unit, this has got to be one of the ones that gets shown alongside some of the others that we've mentioned.
I thought it was interesting, given the nature of both the psychological stuff and the supernatural stuff, that they used that one little light trick to show movement of something or to call somebody's attention. That little strobe light that was zero in. That was an interesting sort of way of working that.
Yeah, but the thing is, because of the paranormal supernatural, you can believe that was something that the characters saw. Mm. So, at least as far as we know, that sort of thing.
So those are our spoiler thoughts on Hereditary. We highly encourage you to check this movie out.
Yeah.
Whether it's now at the theater or whether it's later on at a Redbox or Netflix or whatever your preferred streaming service might be. it's definitely worth seeing, and I think, I'll definitely be picking this up on Blu-ray and going through it. I'll want to listen to the commentary for this one for sure.
Of course. Hey, I wonder if there's like a musical commentary.
Probably not. Dang. Anyway, so that is our thoughts there. We enjoyed the film, Heidi more so after she had time to think about it.
Yeah, I needed to let it marinate because just to say, I felt like the ending was kind of sudden. Like it was kind of jarring almost how quickly it happened. But they were building up to it for 2 hours, and I think if you spent time thinking about where they were adding in the elements to build up to that, it made more sense to me after I'd had time to think about it. So yeah, definitely liked it more in the morning than I did when I first walked out because I needed time to think.
Yeah, and it's as I'm smelling our dinner cooking in a crock pot right now, it reminds me that one of the things I really liked about this is that it wasn't in a hurry. It told us the story that it needed to tell, and it slow simmered it, letting us get to know the characters, letting us get to know the backstory, letting us get to know everybody's damage and how they interact with one another, until it all came together in that third act. And by the time I got to the third act, I mean, you were gripping me fairly tightly. It got fairly intense.
Well, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the jump scares, and I even though it hadn't shown it to be the case, I was like, oh, what's gonna happen here? But it was all right. It was good.
But it wasn't a jump scare.
No
type
jump
of movie.
scares.
It was just you didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
And it gives you that jump scare feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen next. And so you tend to tense up a little bit. But yeah, definitely worth your time. Check it out when you get a chance.
Yep.
If you've already seen Hereditary, hop down to the comments and let us know what you thought. Did we forget to mention anything cool that you noticed? If so, let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video,
hit that thumbs up.
And consider subscribing to the channel. We're actually a really small channel right now. Still, we haven't been going very long. But if you like the videos that we're doing, share them with friends so that they know that we're here. The more subscriptions we get, the more we get to do for you. And if you're already subscribed, click that bell icon so you can be notified the next time we drop something new. Until next time, folks.
Bye.
Bye.